please sit down and listen. I don't have phobia of Islam. I was born in Islam. You cannot tell a cub that they have a phobia of cats. Because this is their environment. You know, you tell somebody who never been to the situation Islamophobic. But I, as a son of the religion, I don't have a phobia. I have the right to rebel.
Mossab Hassan Youssef, the son of Hamas, the Green Prince, as he is called, who came from the movement, grew up in the movement. His father was a chief member, still is, in Hamas, and he ended up turning on them during the Second Intifada to save Israeli civilians from suicide bombings. Since then, he has been a big advocate of Israel and a big critic of fundamentalist Islam. So it's funny when students at universities in the United States try to educate Mossab about Islamic fundamentalism and what he doesn't understand about it. Let's see how that went.
So you talk about being pulled by the currents of political ideology. I can agree with you. I can agree with you, right, that being pulled by the political ideology of Islamism is completely incorrect and immoral. But it seems as though you haven't really dived too deep below the waters, and it seems that you're being pulled by a different current and a different ideology. And I think the ideology that you're preaching here is in more than one way Islamophobic. And let me explain to you why I believe so. I will equally condemn Hamas right here on the spot so we can all be clear in this room, right? Thank you for that. But what you are saying, right? And you talk about the treatment of blacks, you talk about the treatment of women, right? You talk about the only democracy in the Middle East. You talk about Arab inability to forge nations, to forge countries. You talk about the lack of existence of a Palestinian.
Don't only talk about it.
I understand. That's you're making my point for me. Thank you. You talk about the lack of existence of a Palestinian identity, and with all due respect, I know you're Palestinian, or some would say that you are. So you have a right to, you know, disavow yourself of that. But you do not have a right to tell other people that their identity does not exist. I believe that it is incorrect, it is immoral to say what identities do and do not exist, to dictate. That is almost the definition of being a bigot, right? And I'm not trying to name call right now, I'm just trying to call it how I see it, right? And so if we can both agree that we're going to condemn Hamas, but also equally refrain from being Orientalist, refrain from being Islamophobic, then we can have a productive conversation. But I am sorry, sir, your rhetoric is inflammatory. You trade in fear. You trade in fear.
Now you're accusing me. You're accusing me.
Closing point.
It's your point to just accuse me.
Closing point.
Okay.
I'm calling it how I see it, so feel free to retort. But this is my last point. So Samuel Huntington has this idea of the clash of civilizations, right? And I saw you spoke to Sam Harris. Sam Harris subscribes to this idea as well. But you portray this idea of the Islam versus the West. Islam versus the West. And I think this is a very, very dangerous idea. If we're both talking about Islamists, right, we can kind of get on the same page. But you say Islamist, but in your rhetoric you describe the Islamic civilization generally, proper, right? So let's just make sure we're getting clear about that. But I think that is inflammatory. I think that you're trading in fear, and I think that is very, very harmful. And that's just what I wanted to say. Thank you.
Yeah, well, look, you can call somebody who's not familiar with a phenomena that they have a phobia of that. Like someone has a phobia of something that is unknown to them. You can say that. You can say this about anybody who did not grow up in that region. But as someone who went to a Sharia school, someone who memorized huge portions of the Quran, someone who speaks the classic Arabic, someone who studied so many Islamic denominations, you cannot accuse them. Are you listening to my answer? You see, you're busy right now, right? Suddenly you're busy.
Listen, I heard exactly what you had to say, and I agree. Islamophobic.
But you want to debate me right now?
Maybe after. Maybe after.
But you want to debate me? Then you need to listen to me until I finish.
Please.
Sit down. Sit down and listen. Okay. So I speak on experience, long experience, much longer experience than your experience combined. Not to reduce you, but have you been to a Sharia school?
No, but I lived.
You haven't. Have you studied the Sharia? Have you studied the Sharia, the 4 major books of legislation? Have you studied them?
Not fully in depth, but I understand Sharia. I've studied Sharia, yes.
So name the 4 main sources of Islam.
I can't do that. I mean, I can tell
Why you cannot do it? You said that you studied it.
When you have Sharia, you're talking about Sharia jurisprudence, you have
I need the sources. There are 4 main sources of Islam all Muslims agree on. What are the 4 sources?
you have Sunnah, you have Hadith, right? You have Quran, right?
That's not it. That's not it. You forgot qiyas and ijma'. So please sit down and listen. Please sit down and listen. I don't have phobia of Islam. I was born in Islam. You cannot tell a couple that they have a phobia of cats. Because this is their environment. You know, you tell somebody who never been to the situation Islamophobic. But I, as a son of the religion, I don't have a phobia. I have the right to rebel. I have the birthright to rebel. I tell you something. I don't mind speaking to him after the event if this is what he wants. Okay, and I don't mind actually debating someone. But the thing is, when you accuse someone, you must support. You know, you accuse me of Islamophobia. This is a big accusation. How can be Islamophobic if this is my natural environment? You know, you cannot tell a fish that a fish is afraid of water.
Well,
You know,
why don't
this
you have the
nonsense.
last word?
Let me just respond very quickly. I don't believe that Islamophobia is a helpful word, right? I think bigotry towards Muslims may be a better one, right? But I'm just using the word that most people understand. When I say that, people know what I'm talking about, right? That's all I'm saying. But we can have this conversation. I wouldn't dwell over the semantics right now, but we could have this conversation more in depth.
Okay,
That's
but
what I
also you need to understand.
Thank you. And
know,
I think
that
Mr. Yusuf is saying he is not a bigot.
This is,
but
if
I'll let
it
him-
was a different function, okay, and I can talk Islam with you all day long, I have no fear, I have no problem of discussing religion, criticizing religion. It's our freedom in this country. You know, people criticize Christianity, criticize Judaism, they make fun of the gods. Why cannot I make the fun of the gods, you know, that I was brought up? But anyway, this is not the right place. Look, I don't want to be offensive. I don't want to be offensive to anybody, but thank you for bringing the topic. We were focusing on Gaza. You tell me that you're from Sudan. You're about like 2,000 miles away. Have you ever been to Palestine or to Israel? You've never been there. So you shake your head when I said the black situation in the territories in denial. But you never been there. Okay. Look, man, I like to build bridges, but false accusations I don't like. And I don't like hypocrisy. I like free people who don't hide in the crowd.
I'm sorry, we really have to end.
How can you say a fish is afraid of water? I don't know how to do his accent, but Musab Hassan Youssef, yeah, he is a character. I would say that maybe there's a little bit of truth in what the student says about him using inflammatory rhetoric, where he said, Mossab once said something like, I would prefer 1 cow to 1,000 Muslims or something like that, which I think was just not something that I would say. But I've learned something in life. You know what I've learned, especially from making these videos? That sometimes the right person for a specific task is extremely flawed. Like sometimes you need the flawed person to kind of break through the barriers that are placed in society. So, for example, we've talked about Trump on this channel. I feel like Trump, who has flaws, only a person like him could have burst through the insane political correctness that you had in the United States back in 2016 and kind of take down the woke. Only a person like him could do it. A more, let's say, perfect person wouldn't have been able to do that task. We talk in another video about Tommy Robinson, what he did to expose the rape gangs, what was called grooming gangs in the UK. only like a person who's kind of a provocateur like him with his, some of the things that he does that you can say, oh, is wrong. Only he could have pushed through all the insane attacks against him to get that story, help put that story to light, bring it to the attention of somebody like Elon Musk. Only he could have done that. A better person, quote, wouldn't have been able to do that. A more like someone who doesn't get into fistfights with people on the street as he did, and bring his lads out to march in the street, which you can say is not productive. But only he could have done what he did, which ends up being a greater good than what a lot of normal people, more normal people, would have been able to achieve. So sometimes for a specific task, you need an imperfect person in order to get the issue across. And I feel like somebody like Mossab fits that character, is that, yeah, he can be inflammatory and everything, but only a person like him with his insane charisma and his insane ability, as he said, to rebel, to come out of that society and then work with the Israelis, with his enemies, to stop suicide bombings that were killing dozens and dozens of innocent people, to get out of the movement and then to be able to speak about it. That you need to be like a very unique and somewhat crazy, like crazy in a good way, to have that level of self-belief in what you're doing and to get out of that death cult and then to come and speak about it. So he is the man for that task. And if you think he has some flaws, yeah, well, he probably does. But as I said, sometimes you need a flawed person to push through the opposition to certain ideas that need to be floated out there, and exposure of terrible actors like Hamas that is needed. He is the man for that task. He grew up in the society. Only he knows it from the inside. And that's why his voice is so, so powerful, has been so powerful, particularly since October 7th in speaking about the issue. Despite being a flawed person, nobody else could ever do what he's doing. Not me, not even another ex-Muslim. Only he can do that. So flawed, maybe, okay, but he is the man for that task. And very often it's a flawed person only who is able to rise to the occasion and deal with the task and bring certain things to light because of the strength of their personality. Because a flawed person has that larger than life personality more often than not. So Mossab Hassan Youssef, you want to understand radical fundamentalist Islam, you want to understand Hamas, you want to understand their nefarious goals in destroying Western societies and swallowing up dumb liberals like that kid over there, listen to Mossab Hassan Youssef. You won't regret it. Thanks for watching. I will see you in the next video. Bye-bye.